Would you say your name and your profession, please?
Yes, I am Natalie Crawford, and I am a teacher at Dunkerton School.
What does an average day look like for you?
So I teach elementary special ed. I teach students K through 3, and so at the beginning of the year, I work with teachers to create my schedule based on students' needs and their typical day schedule. I only have certain times when I can pull kids, and so I create that schedule and then pull small groups all day. So whether that's for their reading goals or their behavior goals or their math goals, that kind of depends on what they need.
Okay.
So,
Well, what kind of education did you have? Like, what did you major in, and where did you go to school?
yes. So I went to school, high school at Dunkerton, and then in school I took some classes through Hawkeye. So I actually got my AA degree before I had my high school diploma, and those were just all your like general college courses. And then I started at UNI and did the elementary education program. And then when I first got into the College of Ed program, you have to have, certain grades and so much time, so many credits first, and then you get into the teaching program. And then I declared that I also wanted a reading endorsement. But then a few semesters in, I realized that your typical schedule at UNI to become a teacher has a lot of reading classes. And I had one class called Meeting the Needs of Diverse Learners. And it taught me a lot about students who have special needs. And I was really excited about it. But it was the only class in the College of Ed courses that was about students with special needs. And so I decided to drop my reading endorsement and add a special education Strat 1 minor, which added a year on to my school. But that was okay. I did a lot of work with small groups and students who had special needs throughout different schools. And I wasn't sure even at that time if I wanted to teach special ed or, be like a fourth grade teacher. I actually had my heart set on first grade, but I just felt like I got so many reading classes already that the minor in special ed was helpful to get more knowledge around students with extra needs. So,
what led you to be a teacher?
So it's funny, my kindergarten teacher actually told my parents that they would be shocked if one day I wasn't a teacher because I was like, the mother hen. I was, telling everybody what to do, and I was always worried about everybody except myself, and I was, playing school at home and all of that. But I think the older I got, I just had a passion for helping people, and I actually wanted to be a vet for a long time, but I'm terrified of needles and blood. And so, just the more I worked with kids, and I was like a SES student in high school and really loved that. And I felt like the more I was in school, the more I loved it. So I pursued teaching. Yeah.
How many years have you been teaching?
This is year 9.
9.
Yeah. So after I left UNI, I went and taught in Texas for 2 years. UNI has a special program with a school district in Texas, and so I did one of my week-long studies there, and then I did my student teaching there, and then they pretty much guarantee that if you student teach there that you get hired there, and so it felt like a fun vacation. And so I taught in Texas for 2 years, and then got engaged in Texas and decided I wanted to move home and be close to family. And so then a job was open at Dunkerton, and I felt like this was home. So I've been here ever since.
Would you ever switch teaching different grade levels or teach more like a class? Like
in a classroom.
Class?
Yeah. So in Texas, I taught 4th grade, reading and writing for 2 years. And then when I came back, I went into special ed, which was new for me, and loved that. And then right after COVID, actually, I a position was open in third grade because we were trying to get really small class sizes with all the COVID regulations. And so I had a third grade class that year and absolutely loved it. And at the end of the year, there was a position opening. Our school needed a behavior interventionist. And so it was hard to decide if I was going to stay in the classroom or go back to like this behavior role, special ed role. But ultimately, decided special ed because it's what our school needed at the time. And then I've been in special ed ever since. But every single year when, we're a small school, and so depending on enrollment and class sizes and, there's always some moving around of teachers and grades and all of that. And every year I always wonder like, oh, should I go teach fourth grade?
Yeah.
Or, oh, there's a position open in third grade. Should I go teach? And so it's, I love having the option always to, go back to the classroom if I want, but I like special ed too, so.
Would you ever do anything besides teaching?
I don't think so. When days get hard, I think there's times that it's like, well, it'd be really great to like work at a bank or, like be a stay-at-home mom. But at the end of the day, I think, my heart is in teaching and I really just can't see myself doing anything else. Mm-hmm.
Would you say that teaching affects your home life?
Yes. So before children, I would say that it was easy to be at school a lot. So it was easy to say like, oh, I'm not going to be home until 6 o'clock because I have, the schoolwork to do. And at the time, my husband worked late. So, if he was at work till 6, I would stay till 6. That's not as easy with kids, but teaching takes a lot of patience. And so I think the days that I have to use extra patience at school, it can be harder to be a patient mom at home, which would, I think, be one of the negative things. But I also think there's so many positive things about it too, because, I feel like the way I, teach my kids and talk to my kids and discipline my kids is a lot different than, some people who aren't a teacher and know about like development stages and different things that make a kid who they are. So I would say that there's some pros and cons, but yes, definitely affects home.
Yeah. Would you say it kind of changes or you implement stuff on how you raise your kids or like teach them?
Yes. Yeah. I feel like, there's just certain things that I'm like, nope, we're not doing that today. Or, like I feel like just knowing the research about kids reading and, the more kids read, the more their language develops or, I feel like that's helped me as a mom. Yeah.
What are some of the biggest struggles that you have or some challenges that you face?
So right now, so I'm teaching special ed, and this is the time of year when a lot of like IEP meetings happen, and that requires a lot of testing and a lot of paperwork and a lot of documenting. And so most teachers would tell you we just want to work with the kids. I just want to teach kids all day long. I don't love all the paperwork that goes along with it. You can kind of, when you look around at my classroom, you see all the piles everywhere. And so I would say that that's a challenge, just to try to decide, the priorities of when I'm meeting with kids, I'm teaching kids, and the paperwork can find a time later. But, sometimes later is time to pick up my kids from daycare, and, there's always there's always something to do with teaching. You're always putting activities together and lesson planning and getting stuff ready for kids. But I would say that it's it can be a challenge to decide like when all of the things get done that need to get done that aren't necessarily the priority. If that makes sense.
Yeah. How do you deal with all the different types of parents?
Yeah, so my job is a little bit interesting about parents because when I meet with parents, So sometimes I have students who have had an IEP for years. And so parents know how it goes, know how the meetings go. We meet every year. We talk about how they're progressing, what we're going to work on next. A lot of parents are like, yep, no problem. They're a really important part of the IEP team. And so, parents really trust us to decide where the learning goes next, but they're an important part of making those decisions. But then there's also parents who, like we just had a family of a child in kindergarten, and so this student hasn't had an IEP yet. We're just determining that this child needs some more supports, and so that can be, and it's not always challenging, but it's just something to figure out that, like, I'm going to go to this parent and say, hey, your child's in kindergarten and they're not where they're supposed to be academically, and so we need to give your child more support. And so some parents right away are like, oh yes, we noticed that at home. We would love the extra help. Some other parents or families might hear like, we're considering special ed, and they say, oh, no. So I think at the end of the day, it's always important to remember that, parents are protective of their babies, and most of the time they're on our side, and they want what's best for their kid, which is the same as us. And there's usually not a whole lot of problems there. Yeah. But sometimes when parents get angry, it's because they just care a whole lot. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that I have a lot of problems with parents, thankfully. So that's good. Yeah.
What does the hiring process look like to become a teacher or a?
Yeah. So in Iowa, there's a big website that posts all the teacher openings. And I think you have to post like your resume, your cover letter, and information on that. Or school websites have them posted. And then you apply and you schedule an interview. Our interviews here are typically with the team that you will work with. So when I interviewed, I was actually on Zoom because I lived in Texas. And so other special ed teachers and then one general education teacher and the principal were a part of my interview. I've also sat in on interviews, and usually it's, 2 or 3 or 4 people, and we just all ask different questions, and then we meet after to discuss, is this someone we want to hire or not? Mm-hmm. And then the principal calls later and offers or doesn't offer the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you say your career has changed, or the way you teach has changed since you first started?
Yeah. So there's a lot of times that I joke but am kind of serious and say, well, college didn't teach me that.
Yeah.
Because, kids are spontaneous and schedules mm-hmm. change, and even just, the way we teach changes. So when I first started teaching, I was only teaching reading and writing to 4th graders. And so I was really focused on that grade level. When I taught in Texas, there was a big push for this new curriculum, and it was all really exciting and fun, and they had trainers come in and teach you things. And so I was all about this one specific reading and writing curriculum. And then when I moved to Dunkerton, they didn't have that. And so eventually we got it, which I was super excited about. But by then I was the special ed teacher, and so I didn't get to teach that like I had in mm-hmm. Texas. So that kind of changed just because I teach more specific skills instead of like a wide range of components of reading and writing and math. And I also hadn't taught math. So that was interesting. But even just like within the last year, a lot of research has come out about how we teach reading, and mindsets are shifting and things are changing. And so the way that we've always taught reading is we're starting to learn that there's some better ways. Mm-hmm. And so you learn those through different trainings or classes, or, our PD days are really important. And so right now the state is pushing it's called letters training. And so teachers have to be certified in that. And so we're learning lots of information there. So when people say that teachers are lifelong learners, that's definitely true. Yeah.
How do you see this career changing or staying the same in the future?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's, in 9 years, I feel like there's been some big changes and some things that stay the same. I was just joking with my old second grade teacher about, they do one of the projects that they're doing a project now that we did when I was here in second grade. And so just to talk to her about that specific project and how, standards have changed and different parts of the activity have changed, but really the basic, research and crafts and stuff has stayed the same. I also feel like, people might blame COVID for like, oh, kids are different, or oh, parents are different. And I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of that here, I feel like, but we're really spoiled in a small town too.
Yeah.
So,
What characteristic would you say you need or help you in this type of field?
Well, you definitely have to be flexible. So, flexible in, the way you think, the way you teach, your schedule, the way you work with people. I think you have to have, good relationship skills. Like, I work with a lot of people. I work with, the speech person and the OT person from like the AEA and the consultant from AEA. I work with the principal every day. I work with the teachers that I share students with, and we have to discuss all the time about schedule changes or academic needs. And so I think, if you don't have some of those communication and relationship skills, that can really be a struggle. But also like, relationships with kids and that's important.
Yeah.
It's funny because sometimes people will be like, oh, you don't know that? You're a teacher. And it's like, well, you don't have to be a genius.
Yeah.
You don't have to know everything about content to be a teacher. Because, a lot of that information is, we learn that, or we have books that help us teach. But yeah, some of the other things you can't really learn from a textbook. Yeah. So if that makes sense.
How often or how much work do you have to take home or have outside of normal school hours?
Yeah, good question. So I kind of touched on that a little, but I would say at the beginning of my career, I was doing it all the time. I had no, I don't know, is it self-control? I did not have boundaries of I'm not taking this home, or, I would stay until 6 and then I would take a bag home and do all kinds of, prep and grading and work at home. It also was helpful that I didn't have kids. So my life was school. Now I have kids and I can't always, stay till 6 and then work every minute when I get home. I also think it's because, I've done this job for a couple years now that I don't need quite as much time to plan and prepare. So I would say that the work I take home is a lot less. But there's definitely still times that, you take your backpack full of things to get home all the weekend. And so.
What is something about your job that surprises people, or a common misconception that others have?
Well, the one about that teachers need to know everything. If I say, I don't know something, and someone will say, oh my gosh, you're a teacher, you don't know that? And it's like, well, you don't have to know all the facts and, all kinds of things to be a teacher. I don't know, I guess, I think sometimes people have misconceptions about what a school day looks like, sometimes I'm a mom, sometimes I'm a teacher, sometimes I'm a nurse, sometimes I'm a counselor, and so I think Yeah. If people are confused about my job, sometimes I'm like, well, why don't you come to school with me?
Yeah.
Because it's like, no, here's what actually happens in a school. Or, going back to your question about angry parents, I think sometimes parents or other people might be angry about something, but it's a lot of times because they don't really understand it all. But yeah, I guess it's not a very good answer, but
Oh, that's good. Okay.
just some ideas I had.
Yeah. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
What is a piece of advice for someone looking to become a teacher?
Get in the classroom. Lots of teachers will let you come in and help and work with kids and talk to you. I think the more you see what's, the behind the scenes thing, because, everybody's been through elementary school, everybody knows what it looks like to be a teacher, but I think a lot of times kids don't know, like, you don't know when you're a second grader what your second grade teacher does, So yeah, I think the more you can get into classrooms, the more you can work with kids. I always think that it's good resume builders when you have a job that aligns with, working with kids, like if you can work in daycares or, nanny for families or babysit or, work in a school, be a para. The more you can have experience, I think, the better. Yeah. So, yeah.